Hello, ghouly spookonauts. Welcome to the Halloween special of Interbeing Art. Today I'm going to talk to you about the spookiest class of archetypes belonging to Datura. Datura is a plant containing the psychoactive chemical hyoscine or scopolamine, which I'll be calling it scopolamine just because it's easier for me to say. Datura belongs to the nightshade family of plants. It is also referred to as devil's trumpets, hell's bells, or Jimson weed. Variants of Datura are actually found all over the world, and as a consequence, it has been picked up by shamans across the globe. So it has developed quite a few different cultural backgrounds and mythologies. It is found throughout Asia, some parts of Africa, such as Ethiopia, and all throughout the Americas. So not only is there a long history of shamanic use of this plant and chemical, but there's also quite a variety of different uses. This substance is classified as a deliriant, a dissociative, an anesthetic, and most relevant to us, a hallucinogenic. The chemical itself is used for anesthetic surgery. It's used to help nausea and seasickness. It also helps with reducing saliva and all sorts of different uses. To be clear, in this video, I'm going to focus on the archetypes of Datura and not really talk too much about the safe use of Datura. Because to be honest, I think the safest way to use Datura is just simply to not. Now, I know there's a lot of people who like Datura and scopolamine, but I personally cannot recommend it because it is dangerous on quite a few levels. Compare it to another substance that I talk about frequently, salvia. Salvia is another terrifying hallucinogenic drug, but just to briefly compare and contrast the dangers of salvia versus Datura. With salvia, in my opinion, the biggest danger with it is having a psychological trauma of having such an intense hallucinogenic experience. But physically, there is no damage that is done. Contrast that with Datura. Not only is it very hard to get an accurate dose of scopolamine, but it is also highly poisonous. All parts of the Datura plant contain dangerous levels of anticholinergic tropane alkaloids, which can be lethal if ingested. For the poisonous aspect alone, I cannot ever recommend people take a drug that can be potentially lethal. And besides the poisonous effects of Datura, where salvia lasts 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes max, Datura can last over 3 days. Side effects of Datura include dilated pupils, high heart rate, vomiting, convulsions, hypertension, high fever, loss of muscle control, confusion, delirium, amnesia, and memory loss. And all those side effects also lend to it being a highly dangerous substance. There are just too many cases of people taking the substance and actually never becoming the same again. I know that people say that once you take DMT or salvia, you're never the same again because your mind is open to a whole new realm of possibility, but it's not the same with Datura. People can suffer from long-lasting negative effects of Datura, such as ongoing memory loss, hallucination persistence disorder, having trouble breathing, reading and writing, and not being able to think straight. It's really sad to hear about these cases where people come out of a Datura trip and they literally can't function the same. There are definitely safer psychedelics to use if you want to explore consciousness and hallucinations, in my opinion. So I just want to give a few tragic examples. There was one fellow who tried to brew a tea of Datura, and after taking the tea, because of its deliriant effects, he ended up making more tea and drinking more without even realizing it or even remembering it. And he left the tea on the stove and nearly burned his house down. Another example is of a person who took too much and ended up waking up like a week later in someone else's house, covered in his own shit and totally naked. And cases like this are too common and just so tragic. Like, really, this can be avoided. So hopefully that deterred anybody from actually wanting to take this substance, because I really hope that you don't. If I get pressed enough in the future, I will do a how to take Datura video, but I don't really want to because, again, I don't really want people to do this substance. But I do believe in harm reduction, and yeah, so whatever keeps people safe. And I cannot emphasize enough that the hallucinations of Datura are terrifying. They're very, very spooky. In terms of spooky and disturbing imagery, Datura tops all other hallucinogenics in my opinion. But without further ado, let's talk about these spooky ass archetypes. The hallucinations of Datura are marked by being highly disturbing. This is just my own vague theory. I think the fact that Datura is poisonous might lend to the fact that the hallucinations in Datura are often disturbing. Often people hallucinate blood leaking from the walls, out of books or Bibles, people crying blood. This is probably due to the fact that your brain is telling you that there is something wrong, that a toxic agent is in the body. But again, that's just my guess. Crying blood and seeing blood dripping from your walls, I don't know, that would disturb me personally. People also hallucinate all sorts of disturbing imagery, like tacks being on the floor, seeing hallucinations of people dying or death, deformed bodies, people committing suicide, and all sorts of other violent acts, shadow creatures, all sorts of mythical creatures such as gnomes, elves, pixies, fairies, Tamagotchi animations. That may seem cool, and I think a lot of people who take this substance hear that kind of thing and they're like, hey, I want to see gnomes and fairies and deformed people and hellish landscapes. That sounds pretty interesting. But unfortunately, a lot of the times people hallucinate more mundane and weird stuff, such as having long conversations with their friend that isn't really there, not knowing what time of day it is, thinking that it's a different time of year. And hallucinations like that aren't really fun because you're trying to get insight into your own mind and consciousness and see some cool imagery, but instead you can't tell what's really going on without actually providing really interesting insight. And it's not really like cool or interesting imagery, it's just messed up. Probably the coolest hallucination is when people get endless cigarettes behind their ears. I mean, that would save you a lot on buying cigarettes that are so expensive nowadays. I mean, just having endless cigarettes behind your ear, perhaps it's just a coincidence, but scopolamine actually agonizes the same receptors that nicotine does. But either way, that would save you on cigarettes. But I mean, if you can't find cigarettes, I don't recommend taking scopolamine because you would hope for endless cigarettes behind your ear and instead you get deformed demons. Getting back to the spooky stuff, people can use this substance to talk to the dead. I've had psychonauts reach out to me specifically to talk about Datura and the fact that they're able to talk to dead relatives on the substance. I mean, given the fact that people hallucinate entire conversations with friends that aren't there who are still alive, it suggests to me that it gives the brain an opportunity to have conversations with memories of people, the part of a person's spirit that lives in the memory. People talk to all sorts of spirits and stuff on scopolamine. Talking to spirits and the dead is probably why witches used to use it in seances. I mean, there's also that rumor that they used to put Datura on the end of broomsticks and put that well, they used to insert it into their genitalia, and that would give them a sense of flying, which is argued to be where that flying witch archetype even comes from. I don't know if that's true, but you know, I guess it seems plausible. I have no idea what the dose would be for boofing Datura. But there is this sense I've read in quite a few trip reports where people seem to be opening a communication barrier between realms, where there is this like shadow realm that they're able to talk to, where the hellscape kind of derives from. Though I could find little writing in terms of these archetypes, there seems to be two central archetypes for Datura. One of those archetypes is known as the Guardian. It is this dog with red eyes that protects the main archetype, who I'll get to in a second. This dog often sits on a throne and is usually surrounded by pretty disturbing images. In the one trip report I've read that contained the Guardian, this guardian dog was sitting in this throne in front of a steamy blood orgy of people like fucking in agony. I mean, we all like a little bit of sadism, masochism, but I think this was like the next level. The trees surrounding the guardian were decorated with squirrel tails. Archetype seems to be protecting the main spirit of Datura. And this central archetype of Datura is known as Queen Tallahassee. Queen Tallahassee is described as tall, white, and imperious, and formed of tricks. I don't think there's any depictions of Queen Tallahassee, and I think that is due to, one, the fact that she's formed of tricks and therefore can't really be depicted, and two, there is a heavy emphasis on the sacredness of this archetype. People don't really like to talk about what she says or disclose any very much information about her at all because it is just seen as too sacred and therefore disrespectful to bring up. I mean, Queen Tallahassee seems very similar to the main archetype of Salvia, which would be the shepherdess. And I find it very weird that these two substances have a central archetype being this imperious female archetype. That's just very curious to me. You know, I'm not really superstitious, but you know, just in case, Queen Tallahassee, I mean you no disrespect, and I beg all my viewers to give the utmost respect to Queen Tallahassee and the Guardian. Don't fuck around with Datura. So there you have it. There are the archetypes of Datura, and just I hope I stressed the dangers of this substance. Again, I can't recommend it. Have a safe Halloween. Please stick to non-toxic hallucinogenics, please, and thank you. Thank you very much to my patrons for making these videos happen. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Have a very good Halloween, everyone. Thanks for watching.